yesterday I was told that my marriage is over, or I've just found out that this has happened. And all of a sudden they have to deal with it, even though they're not mentally or emotionally ready to.
Welcome to the Silent Epidemic by Omnia Therapy. My name is Hatice Mehmet-Quirk, and as always, we are talking about the things nobody else is. Together with our amazing guests, we're deep diving in the mental health challenges that are sweeping the nation and breaking them down piece by piece. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Devon McNamara, a Senior Associate Family Law Specialist at Leonard Gray. Devon, thank you for joining us. Firstly, how are you doing?
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thanks for taking the time to come on today.
No problem.
And for our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and why you love it?
So I'm a family lawyer. I specialise in divorce and children matters. I like my job because I get to support people through one of the toughest times they're going through. You know, divorcing, separating from a long-term partner is a really, can be quite a traumatic thing to go through. But day to day, the role's quite varied. There's a lot, going on, and I like the diversity of the role,
So you get to support people through what is quite a challenging time in their life. And as you said, it's different circumstances. It could be a long-term relationship. Sometimes, obviously, things have turned a bit sour within the relationship, which is why they've come to you.
Yeah.
And then you've got the diversity of not just dealing with the divorce side of things, but then the family matters in relation to the children as well.
Yeah. And not everyone needs your help dealing with the children matters. Some people are able to figure that out themselves. And, those are the best cases, really, when you know that actually you're not needed to be involved in that. But day to day, generally, even if it's just can you just help us sort out Christmas or what's, for the most part, most people are able to figure that bit out for themselves, which shows they're thinking of their kids and acting in their best interests, which is good for me. In fact, working on children matters, I find that the most difficult, actually. The emotional aspect of it that's the most challenging part for me, and especially now I've got children of my own, I find that it's much more difficult now I've got kids to deal with that.
Because before you came on, I did think about, like what you do, and it did cross my mind. That must be really difficult. And as you say, as a mother yourself, knowing that, you want the best for your children, and then seeing people in a situation where they obviously want the best for their children, but it's not simple.
No, and I think when there are so many things going on and they're trying to deal with the practicalities of the divorce itself as well as the money side of everything, people lose sight sometimes of what's in the best interest of their children. But for the most part, when I think about my kids day to day, and even working and trying to manage that with looking after them, I'm always trying to do what's in their interest. And sometimes that is going to work and earning money and making sure we can put a roof over their head. But, there are times when actually you need to put them first.
Yeah. And it's challenging, isn't it? Because as you said, going to work and sort of providing, it's the best thing for, you're doing the right thing by them, but it doesn't always feel like it's the right thing, does it?
No, this week actually, the kids have kind of moved into their new classes, starting the new school year, and they hate it, and they're crying, and dropping them there and knowing I'm going to work is difficult, because I'd rather be with them and comforting them, and I'm having to drop them somewhere that they're saying they hate, and then by the time you pick them up, they're fine, and they run out saying they've had the best day ever. So it's fine ultimately, but that initial leaving them, that's quite distressing for me and them.
And then you've got, as you just said, you've got to carry that all day while you're trying to work, concentrate on quite complex matters, worrying about if they've settled or not. And then when you go to pick them up, it's like they're not the same children.
I know, it's true. But I have to kind of not think about it. I try to call the nursery when I get to work and make sure actually that they've settled down, and generally within 5 minutes they're fine. just so I know I can go about my day and not worry about them.
Yeah.
Trying to work and look after children, I definitely have to have that boundary of getting to work and focusing on work.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, my job, there's a lot of pressure on me. And I think it's looking at everything in a bit of a time frame, you know, right? So before 8:30 or whenever it is, I'm mum, I look after my kids, I get them dressed and ready for school. And then I get to work and I'm me at work and I do my day and then I pick them up. And I have to, you know, even if I have to log on in the evening and do more work once they're in bed, that time picking them up after school and putting them to bed is my time with them.
Yeah.
It is hard though when you're thinking about all the things you need to do and knowing that you can't get to them until a certain time. But I try not to do that too much because it takes away from the time I get to spend with the boys.
It sounds like you're quite boundaried then in terms of, right, okay, so when I pick them up, my focus is going to be on them, despite all the stuff that I've got whirring in my head of the to-do list that I've still yet to complete. At the moment, I need to focus solely on my children. Once they've gone to bed, I can then carry on with my day.
But I think you have a to-do list in your head constantly, don't you? Even when it's not to do with work.
Yeah.
I said to my partner last night, when you sit on the sofa, what are you thinking about? Because I'm thinking about how the washing needs getting out and the dinner needs making, or I need to do a food shop, and I'm not just sitting there mindlessly. I'm thinking about all of these hundreds of things that need doing. You don't relax, really. There's never a period of time where I feel actually relaxed because of all these things that are just whizzing around all the time.
So I'm going to ask you a pretty personal question here.
Okay.
Because what you've just described there is typical of, you know, a mother working, managing a household, those endless tasks.
Yeah.
You know, you could wake up at 2:00 in the morning and the mind just starts going with that to-do list. How do you switch off?
I like to exercise. So once I've put the kids in bed, if I haven't got to jump straight back on my laptop, I do a workout, even if it's just 20 minutes. Yeah. Because that, you know, it does kind of bring me back to my life a little bit. Because I'm new to being a mum as well. Yeah. So actually doing that reminds me of, you know, how I used to be pre-kids when I'd have the time to actually do exercise. And it's quite a new thing that I've reintroduced, but I feel like it's massively benefited me. Yeah. And it's kind of a transition as well. You know, I'm not going straight from putting the kids to bed to then going back on my laptop. Yeah. I've got that 20 minutes where I can do something for myself and I feel like I've... But if I don't have time for exercise, then a glass of wine goes down well.
Are there particular challenges unique to the legal field that make this balance even more difficult?
I don't know generally in respect to the legal field, but particularly in my area of law. I feel like the emotional aspect of my job and what it entails dealing with people who are emotional, are going through that really difficult time, leaving their emotions at work and not, you know, when I worked at home through COVID and I had my laptop at home 24/7, it was so much more difficult to forget or to put to the back of my mind what these other people that I'm talking to all day, every day are going through. Yeah. And I like going into the office and knowing that's where I think about all of these things. And then when I leave there, I don't do that anymore. But you know, family law is just such a emotionally trying, you know, industry, professionalism to work in. And I'm sure other areas of law have their own pressures, you know. Yeah. It might be working in other areas of law, you work longer hours or you've got money pressures on you. My pressures are from, you know, wanting to do a good job for a client that's relying on me or who's trusting me, you know. There's a lot of responsibility in my job. Yeah. And I find that that's quite a big responsibility.
And as you say, that emotional balancing those emotions of all your clients, because it's not just one client that you've got, and they're all sound like they must have very different, unique cases. Yeah. and you're obviously feeling the pressure to get them the outcome that they're looking for.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned being at home and not being able to have that separation from this is work time and this is home time. When you're doing it at home, how do you separate that?
Yeah, I think just I try to limit the amount of time I do work at home. It's more on an urgent basis, or if I had to leave for some reason early and wanted to catch up. So, you know, when you're at home, you can't really talk about the job that you do day in, day out, because you've got client confidentiality and you have to, you know, bear that in mind. So talking to someone about what you deal with day in, day out is always very, you know, it's not like a straightforward conversation. You're not able to give specific details, and that makes it hard to vent, really, because then the only people you can vent to are the people that you work with and the people that know the cases that you're working on. And in a way that's better, because actually it means you're talking to people who could offer some kind of advice or support. Whereas, you know, if I was talking to my partner about it, he wouldn't know what I was even talking about, really. Because it's not just necessarily the day-to-day or the emotional side of what these clients are going through, but actually how do I advise them legally as well.
So by talking to a colleague, you're able to sort of almost check in, let them know what you're dealing with, what's going on for you, check that perhaps maybe you're on the right path and you've given the right advice in that instance. And then obviously being at home, you can't talk to your partner. As you said, there's client confidentiality, but also there's that element of he isn't really going to understand the background of all of the intricacies of the decisions and the pressure that you're feeling in regard to that particular case. Yeah,
and I think when you don't know the law, you have an opinion on things, and whether that opinion can be, you know, whether you can kind of go with that or not depends on legally whether that's right. I think that's a very complicated way of saying it, but actually it's not the case that simply you can have an opinion and go, well, that's how it should be. Legally, it doesn't matter, you know, what your opinion is. It's what actually the law can do or not do.
Is that a challenge perhaps that has come in for you more so now that you are a mum? Because as a mum, you think actually this is right and it should be like that and it should be like this. But the law doesn't dictate that. So then you've got that pull of, well, which direction do you go? And obviously you choose the legal route, but then you're quite unsettled with what's going on because you're feeling it from a mother's or a parent's perspective.
Yeah, I think because I was a lawyer first, I don't think I've had that as much as I thought I would. I think I feel more emotional dealing with children cases, or even separation actually, because particularly where there are children involved, I can relate to it much more now. I feel like I've got another kind of, you almost get another dimension to your practice because you have that empathy as a mother and not just as a lawyer. I think when you're a lawyer anyway, you can't really have an opinion in that sense because you know legally how you've got to deal with something, so you can't have that personal opinion that differs from that, you know. And that is probably what you vent to your colleagues about. I wish I could do this or say this, but I can't. And I've got a couple of really difficult cases, or, you know, really emotional cases at the moment, which are not necessarily going to go the way that I think they should go, but there's, you know, that's not how it goes.
How do you deal with stress and prevent burnout when the pressures from both your personal and professional life mount up?
I'll let you know. How do I prevent burnout? I do think I'm still genuinely learning how to figure that out, because you get so stuck in to your work and it's hard to say, right, I've got to call it a day today, you know. I think I've recently changed jobs, and in my new role, because I do go into the office more than I was, I do have that cut off, you know. But preventing burnout, I feel it would be so easy to forget to have that, right, I've got to have that boundary. And I do think boundaries and having those specific allocated times that you do certain things. When you're a mum anyway, you've got routine, right? So you do everything at certain times of the day. The kids go to bed at 7, and before that we do a bath and we read stories, and everything's kind of a bit regimented anyway.
Yeah.
So I do think having a routine, you can be stricter with yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's a kind of key to preventing work taking over your life, which it so easily could do. If I didn't have children, and before I had children, it would have been easy. I'm just going to stay at work for another hour, another couple of hours, and get things done and feel more on top of it. And it does mean sometimes coming in the next day and thinking, I've got loads to do today. But actually, personally, I'm more productive when I have that little bit of pressure, you know, right, I've got to get things done. I've got to finish X, Y, Z by the end of the day. And I do just think it's taking a bit of time for yourself, or I don't really have any hobbies. And I do think if I had a hobby or something that I could turn to, that would help as well.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like your method is this idea that your set times of the day where you're wearing the different hats. I'm like, okay, now I'm wearing my mum hat, now I'm wearing my professional hat.
Yeah.
That's helping you manage your day-to-day tasks as such.
Yeah.
And even, you know, you mentioned earlier on that 20-minute workout of just connecting with and reminding yourself that I'm still here. You know, I'm not just a professional. I'm not just a mum. I am me as well.
Yeah.
Help you to keep grounded, to balance all these different hats that you're wearing.
Yeah.
And as you say, like, you know, if you had a hobby, and that would be another layer of just turning to something for you.
Yeah.
But as you said, your kids are quite young and you're still navigating.
There's no time.
That. Yeah. So eventually I'm sure you will find that way.
Yeah.
But in the early days, it is difficult to manage all of it.
It is tough. And I've been back at work for a year, but that's gone really quickly. And you kind of think, a year in, I'll have it all figured out. And you don't. And you're still winging it every day. Yeah. But if I actually looked back, I have made progress between then and now in terms of managing my time and making sure that the boys are getting my attention when I'm with them, and I'm not thinking about work in that time. I also think me and my partner have become better at communicating in that time, because at first I tried to do too much. And, you know, we have to have regular conversations about actually what should be done, how things should be shared, because I do work.
Yeah.
And he does, you know, he understands that, and we just have to communicate. And that's a big, really important thing in our relationship, is making sure we each understand we're both working really hard.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're, you know, that typical, I've gone back to work, I'm going to try and, you know, be superwoman and get it all done. And then that realization that actually this isn't just my job. I need to share this with their father, and he needs to do his bit as well.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is to open that communication so that you can support each other. You're both aware that you're both working hard and putting the hours in to provide for the family together.
Yeah.
And that also means mucking in together to do the menial tasks that a lot of mums do try and take on as, I need to do this.
Because you are doing all of those house things before you go back to work. So it is an adjustment. I accept that, you know, and that's where the communication comes in. If you don't report back and say, actually, I can't do every single thing, then how's he going to know?
Yeah.
You know, how's your partner going to know unless you're communicating with them?
Yeah, of course. Can you share with us some of the hardest days you've faced as a lawyer, as a mum, or both? What factors contributed to those bad days? Was it workload, emotionally heavy cases, or maybe even just family stuff?
Most recently, my eldest got chickenpox, and he was sent home from nursery. And I got to work, and I think it was Monday morning, and it's like 10 o'clock and I'm just about to go into a meeting, get a phone call from nursery. And whenever I see that number flash up on my phone, I think, oh God.
Yeah.
You need to come and get him. We think he's got chickenpox. He needs to go to the chemist or pharmacy and you need to find out. I think, just about to start a meeting, can't get there straight away. And they do put a bit of pressure on, you know. They obviously can't keep a sick child at school, which is fair enough. But in that moment, having to essentially drop everything and leave work, regardless of what anyone else might think or say, you just have to go. And then juggling, having, you know, he wasn't unwell with it. He was actually fine in himself. So having him at home, bouncing off the walls, not able to go out, and I'm trying to work and do my job, that's tough, really tough. Because I don't want to mix those things together. And then I feel like I'm having to put the telly on for him and kind of leave him to it a little bit and while I'm trying to do my job. And you don't feel like you're giving either 100%. You're having to kind of give what you can to each job. And you've got him saying, can I have a snack? Can I have a drink every 5 minutes? And having to leave your work and go and sort him out. It's a real. I don't know how during COVID people worked from home, looked after. And I know I've mentioned COVID a couple of times, but I didn't have children during COVID. I can't imagine how difficult that would have been to have children, to do your job. The thought actually is horrendous. I can't imagine it. Yeah, because it's hard enough doing your job. Doing one at a time, let alone having to try and juggle them both at the same time.
It almost seems like your strategy there of wearing the different hats and that's how you manage everything that you've got going on was tested because you had to combine the two. All of a sudden you've got this phone call from the nursery, you've got to drop your work hat at a time when you should be wearing that hat. Then you pick up your child from nursery, as you say, when they've got chickenpox. They're not really unwell, are they? So they're still full of energy. They're running around. And then you've got him at home. You're trying to work and juggling those two combined. It is a pressure.
It's tough. And, you know, when you first start back at work after maternity leave and put them in school, that's when they get every illness under the sun. And I remember going in to work and I just started a new job and being like, I've got to leave. And luckily, I've worked for most places I've worked for. Everyone's understood that, you know. There's been real understanding and flexibility with that. So that does take some of the worry away. But my concern is not disappointing my clients, making sure I'm finishing things in a time frame that I've set for myself and that usually I've told my clients. And so those expectations, I don't like not meeting them. So it's a pressure I put on myself, definitely. But you do also have pressures from clients because they want things done. They don't want their case to drag on for years. And a lot of that's out of our hands, depending on the courts and stuff like that. But if the court aren't involved and it's purely down to us, there are things we can work on the case and move it forward. And if I'm not at work, I can't do that.
So it sounds like the places that you're working are supportive in terms of their understanding. If you've got to go and pick up a child from nursery, you've got to go. That doesn't release the pressure of the workload that you've got to do.
Course.
You've got deadlines, you've got people waiting on you to get this thing done. And then people already under enough pressure.
Definitely.
So really their understanding of you having to go off to pick up a child from nursery might not necessarily be there because in the middle of their drama in their life, they don't want to know about your problems.
No, of course not. And I don't, I try to be careful what I tell or who I tell what because, that could be a sensitive topic for certain people as well. So, every now and again, it can't be helped, right? And you just have to do what you can. And so having a level of priority on my to-do list, right? This has to be done today. Whatever happens, I have to get this done. This could wait till tomorrow, and I have to find time to do it. And that just is what it is. I work 3 days a week as well, so I'm condensing, all of my work into those 3 days. That doesn't happen. Generally, that doesn't happen. So I'm having to pick up work other days to, because I don't want my clients to have to wait. They know that I only work 3 days a week, but it's that pressure I put on myself. I don't want to come in on Monday morning and someone's had to wait from Wednesday to hear from me. If I have a moment to respond and I can do something fairly quickly and kind of tick that off my list, then I'll do that. Yeah. But it's just another pressure that it's a lot of internal pressure rather than pressures from other people.
Yeah. As someone who works closely with people going through one of the most stressful times of their lives, how do you see divorce impacting your clients' mental health?
I think divorce impacts people very differently, and you can't actually know how a client is going to be. Everyone deals with that so personally, and sometimes you get someone come to you and they've been planning it, or they've got through that initial stage of grief and they're in the practical stage where they're trying to just sort everything out.
Yeah.
And then you get the other person who comes in and says, yesterday I was told that my marriage is over, or I've just found out that this has happened, and all of a sudden they have to deal with it, even though they're not mentally or emotionally ready to. And I think knowing and being able to kind of gauge where someone is in that, in that state, in those stages, and guide them through that. That's part of the job, when you first meet with someone, kind of, are you actually ready to go through this process? Are you, have you got to that point? Because once you start, it's full on, and you started something, you can get off at any point. I mean, you can stop it from being finished. But once you start dealing with it, all of the emotion that comes with that will come. And so it's asking that question, you can gauge when people come in and they're saying, I just want to get a bit of information. Have you actually separated? Have you had a conversation about separating? Have you told the other person what's their thoughts on it? Because how they respond to those questions kind of dictates whether you go ahead and you say, right, this would be what we do next, or if actually you should be signposting them to couples therapy or some kind of counselling to help them, if there's any possibility of saving their marriage, help them through that.
So that's quite varied, isn't it? Because as you said, you've got the different stages of grief. You've got someone that sort of come to the acceptance stage of actually this marriage is over and I now need to navigate the steps, the official steps of putting the nails in the coffin as such of ending this marriage. And then you've got, on the other hand, you've got people that are shocked. Yesterday they got up, they went to work, they went about their daily life as though everything was all in order and life was okay. And then in the evening, bang, they're told, I want a divorce. And they weren't expecting it. That's got to be...
They're the really difficult first meetings, really, when you've got someone coming in and they're coming in because they want to feel like they've got a bit more of their power back. I think that kind of conversation where they're not expecting to be told that, they get knocked off their feet and they're thinking, what can I actually do here? I need to get information. I need to know where I stand and what I can do next, whether that's to protect themselves or to just to have that understanding so they're ready to make decisions or even be remotely, in a place where they could start to think about it. It must be really tough.
Because what you just described there, it's like someone's just had the rug pulled from underneath them. So as you said, all of a sudden, that life as they knew it is over. And now they're trying to navigate this change that ultimately they haven't chosen or instigated, and that need to have some sort of control is where you come in, I suppose.
I mean, most people, when they come to me, they've got to the point where they, they're a bit past that and they're kind of, okay, right, I'm ready to start thinking about this now. But you definitely have the clients that come in and they've just had I had a woman come in recently and I said to her, this is not the right time to be doing this. She was not ready for the meeting with me. There were things she needed to do before that to get herself to that place. Because the initial meeting you have with me, there's so much information coming at you. And unless you're in the right frame of mind to take it or to, you know, take it on board, it's a waste of your time and money, you know, because I'm telling you or giving you the information that you need to be able to make informed decisions or to help you make informed decisions. And unless you're able to take that on board,
So it's almost like they need to get over that initial stage of shock, because when you're in a state of shock, you're not really going to be computing anything or taking on board any of the advice that you're giving, because you're just not in a position to do that.
Yeah, and a lot of people bring someone with them for that reason. You know, a lot of people bring a parent or a sibling or a friend, and, you know, they say they're here to take notes, they're here to listen, because they know that they're not going to be able to retain all of that information or the information that they need to retain to be able to decide what to do next.
What are some common struggles you see among men versus women during the separation process?
Yeah, the way, stereotypically really, but the way men tend to deal with things is they are much more kind of formulaic, a bit of procedural, right, we need to deal with this, 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 and that. And it's kind of the practical aspects of it. Women tend to be a bit more emotional, and their focus, you know, is thinking about the children, making sure there's a roof over their head. And that's not to say that fathers or that the men don't do that, but I think they have very different ways of approaching it. You know, and that is just a very broad brush, and you know, not everyone's like that.
So divorce obviously doesn't just affect the partners, but also children involved. What do you see as the most common emotional and mental health challenges children face during the divorce process?
I feel like children, you get a sense of one child telling one parent one thing and the other parent another. And it seems as though what they're trying to do is not to upset either of them. You know, they're trying to appease both parents. And it might be, do you want to live with, you know, I feel like sometimes questions are asked of children that shouldn't be, you know, and I have no control over that. But, you know, parents are doing their parenting and you don't always get it right. But sometimes, you know, outrightly asking a child, do you want to live with mummy or daddy, is not necessarily going to get you A, the correct answer, but B, the honest one, you know, and the child will say what they think you want to hear and then do the exact same thing with the other parent. So this is where we get differing instructions. I then write to the other party's solicitor and say, this is what the child's told my client. And they'll say, well, that's not what we've been told. And that's just so, you know, common in these cases, because the children are just trying to make everything better or make everyone happy, which doesn't ultimately get a resolution. And the thing is, it's actually how you talk to your children. How do you go about it the right way so that you're not, you know, causing them any long-term damage in this. And I think it's really important how, you know, just communicating with them, but in a way that, you know, they're not at fault. Nothing that they have done has led to this, you know, and making sure that they're reminded that both parents love and care about them, because I think that can sometimes be, you know, fall a bit by the wayside when everything else is being dealt with.
And I see it quite a bit. It's almost like a tug of war that goes on, and they're forgetting that in the midst of that tug of war is a child. And whilst, you know, this parent thinks that's best and that parent thinks that's best. And I also think that people do forget that even when you're a parent in a loving relationship, when it comes to parenting, you're going to have different opinions, even when you're together. So actually respecting that those different opinions are going to come into force when you're in the midst of a divorce. People forget that.
Yeah, and that's where it all does come back to the communication thing, because you're not always going to see eye to eye, and that's fine. And, you know, when the child is with you, you can parent how you parent, and when the child's, you know, and as long as our main principles, boundaries, morals are all kind of there or thereabouts, then everything else is just personal, isn't it? You know, parenting is such a personal thing, and how you are as a parent will differ, and that's fine. It's how you deal with it. It's how you make sure that the child is always at the forefront of everything, making sure that they're your first consideration, you know, putting their wishes and feelings first.
So I hope you don't mind, but I've put together a hypothetical case because I know that you can't really obviously talk to us about your client work. And as we all know, there's a big breakup going on at the moment with Molly May and Tommy Fury and their separation. So what considerations you'd need to make if they were your clients and they were going through this public separation? So the initial steps, what are the first thing that you would advise them to do from a legal standpoint? And how would you start addressing their emotional well-being during the process?
So we'd only be instructed by one of them. You'd never get a lawyer who's acting for both. So if, for example, I was representing Molly May, I'd, you know, again, I'd go through that kind of question of, are you ready to have these discussions? You know, mentally, are you able to retain and take in the information that you need to take in from this meeting? But just also gauge the emotional state someone might be in, you know, going through, especially such a public breakup. You know, everyone's eyes are on you and what you're going through. And she's been so kind of, she's handled it so well so far. And it's amazing, actually, that how she's done that. But I guess signposting to if she needed any kind of support or, you know, professional help with handling her emotions and what she's going through, kind of addressing that first. But then moving on to kind of advising her legally, I mean, it really depends on their situation in terms of the house and that kind of thing. But the first consideration would be their daughter. And, you know, what does Molly see her daughter's relationship with Tommy looking like in the future? You know, does she want to maintain what they've created in terms of her having her dad there all the time? If we can achieve that, that's surely the best thing for the daughter. And, you know, it's in the interest and it's the right of the daughter to have that relationship with her dad. And should their breakup impact that, you know? And making sure that as long as Molly, as my client, that's what she wants, trying to achieve that and doing that as amicable as possible, you know. Mediation is something that we always advise our clients to consider, and there's a real drive for it at the moment, because mediation is, you know, sitting down, having a conversation with an independent person there who can guide you a little bit through the process and help you have those really difficult conversations to try and reach an agreement which benefits the family as a whole, you know, because even if you're separated, you still have a family that you need to look after and make sure that you're doing right by.
And I suppose mediation stops that tit for tat of, okay, I want this, and no, I'm not going to give you that, I'll give you this instead. And this to and fro between you where you guys are almost sort of playing a tennis match of passing the ball backwards and forwards. By having that mediation, you can sit down, you can amicably agree, okay, right, well, try to amicably agree. You know, this is what I would like. Okay, let's try and find that middle ground to suit both parties. It's
the hope of having more of a conversation about it, as opposed to, like you say, going through solicitors and having, I'll write to you and you write to me. And there's that disjointed disconnection, really, between the parents. And when you're talking about the children, mediation is, you know, a really, really good way of trying to prevent that happening. If there's any relationship to be saved, even as co-parents, mediation's the first stop. You know, let's try and sit down and have these conversations that will be difficult, but we've got to have them, whether they're between us or through other people. And the best way of maintaining any kind of co-parenting relationship would be through mediation, because I do think getting sisters involved sometimes does drive up the hostility of it a little bit. And I try to keep my correspondence, my letters really quite as amicable as they can be, to try not to drive up that friction between them that's potentially already there,
So given their celebrity status, how would you navigate the added pressure of public attention and media coverage on their mental health?
Yeah, I think it's just making sure that they're getting the right support in the background and only sharing what they feel comfortable sharing. There's a difficulty there because you've got two people who are separate from one another, and it's, I guess, whether they're able to agree to have that mutual respect for each other. Right, we're not going to slate each other in the press. We're not going to say nasty things about each other, because at the end of the day, you're still my child's dad, and and having that agreement firstly in place to say, look, let's not do that. Because you see it all the time, don't you, when celebrities are separating and there's horrible, awful headlines about what's happened. And they've been really they've only released information that they want you to hear. And she's even gone on to say, I'm not going to elaborate on the reasons for the breakdown of our relationship or anything like that, because what business is it of ours,
But they're not letting off, are they? Because they're still going at it with, there's this woman that's come forward, or what they think it's this person.
All just speculation,
and there's no actual substance to any of it.
And that must be awful for them, because reading something, but I suppose they deal with that all the time, reading something in the press and thinking, oh my, where's that even come from, It's just rubbish.
But then I suppose then comes even more pressure, because then you start questioning, is it a friend of mine that's leaked it? Is it someone that's been working at the house? Is it, who do you, where does the trust that you've got around, like with the people that you've got around you, that trust is going to start to diminish as things start to be leaked from here, there and everywhere, which is the last thing that a person going through a breakup needs. They need support around them.
I imagine they've got quite tight circles for that reason. You can't imagine that she's got loads of people coming and going for those, because she doesn't want that kind of information leaked, and only having those people you really trust. I can't imagine as a celebrity it's easy to actually make friends, because how do you trust people coming into your circle unless they have a status, like that themselves to an extent? How do you trust people to keep things to themselves, or that must be a really difficult thing to navigate when you become famous, just having those real trust issues, because you can have them just with as a normal person, let alone someone who's got the threat of something being splashed over the paper.
And I suppose when you sort of look at the Instagram lifestyle and you think, oh, wow, she's got it all going on. People don't actually think about that side of it, that even a simple thing as making a friend isn't as easy for someone like her as it would be for, an everyday person, because they've got that worry of that trust, or things being leaked, or, is that person just cozying up to me because they want information about my life?
It must be quite damaging mentally, like emotionally, to have those worries all the time. And it's always looking at someone through a bit of with a bit of suspicion in a way.
What might be the best and worst case scenarios in terms of how their mental health could be impacted throughout the process?
I think as long as there's communication there, that's the best way they're going to limit the impacts on each other mentally and on their child. And it seems as though Tommy has been seeing the baby and taking her out. And I think, luckily, in a way, the baby is so young that actually she's not going to remember what's going on. And as long as they have that kind of respect for one another as parents, what more can they do? It's just making sure that they're not doing or saying anything that is going to cause upset or to make the situation worse or more difficult.
So thank you so much, Devon, for joining us today. If you'd like to connect with her, she works at Leonard Gray, and we'll be tagging them in this episode. To all our listeners and viewers, we truly appreciate you. Please share your thoughts on the episode in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe and share if you enjoyed it. This is the Silent Epidemic. See you next time.